arrested the staff of the Open Society Foundation, owned and operated by none other than George Soros. And they seized the bank accounts of this globalist organization. This is a huge development in the battle for freedom on the global stage. Today, we're going to discuss the implications of what this means and why it suggests big things are coming, not only for the US, but all over the world. We'll also use this story to begin to show you how to decode fake news media to reveal insights into the battle against the deep state and how the cabal engines of control work. You're not going to want to miss this. Welcome, everybody. I'm Justin from Stillness in the Storm. Before we get started, head on over to stillnessinthestorm.com/donate to support our work. Big Tech recently closed down our Vimeo account, and we lost our ad service account last year. This means if it wasn't for your contributions, we couldn't do what we do. You can also support us on Subscribestar to get exclusive benefits. And we just added a Patriot-friendly payment system where you can send one-time or monthly donations directly to us. A few days ago, in an article written by Irwardi, it was revealed that the regime said the opening of the Open Society Foundation Myanmar office came about after George Soros met with ousted Myanmar state councillor Daw Aung San Suu Kyi 4 times between 2014 and 2017. Now, this article and this development reveals a clear link between Soros and the claims that the military made about election fraud that caused them to initiate the coup in the first place. Who would have thought that the country of Myanmar would become such an important part of the plan? Now, let's review some of the history before we get into the developments in this story. Recall that the military, who could very well be aligned with the rule of law and true freedom, overthrew the democratic government. Now, this democratic government had a lot of connections to the deep state actors that you know and love. One of them, as we just discussed, was George Soros. During the last days of the second Obama administration, Hillary Clinton went to Myanmar to establish relations with the Democratic Party of that country. With the help of the Podesta Group, Clinton brokered relationships between the prime minister, who was recently arrested by the military, and Washington, D.C. lobbyists here in the U.S. Many believe that this clearly links the deep state in the United States to the one in Myanmar. According to an April 2015 article from The Diplomat, several media outlets reported that Myanmar had hired the Podesta Group, a powerful U.S. lobbying firm, to represent its interests in Washington, the infamous Podesta Group. Now, the article continues with this revealing paragraph. Connections between governments and other influential actors in Washington, D.C. are far from unique to Myanmar. And speculations about links between the Myanmar government and the Podesta Group, a firm founded by Tony and John Podesta. According to the article, the Podesta Group filed a disclosure on April 10, 2015, with the Department of Justice revealing it was paid $840,000 a year for their lobbying efforts in Myanmar. Now, Kenneth Roth, the executive director of Human Rights Watch, tweeted on April 15th, rather than really reforming, Burma will pay Washington lobbyists $840,000 a year to pretend it is. Now, Roth's comments in that tweet imply that there was more than just lobbying happening. According to The Hill, this was Myanmar's first lobbying relationship with Washington, D.C. Some believe the Podesta Group and Clinton were there to secure human trafficking trade routes for the globalists. Yeah, pretty likely. Vanity Fair reported in 2019 that Trump retweeted conspiracy theories in an article entitled, "Trump's Epstein Response. The Clintons are definitely pedophile murderers." This suggests that the fake news media was yet again trying to downplay the idea that Podestas are somehow involved in human trafficking. Now, of course, while I can't use the term here on YouTube, you likely know what I'm talking about. The fact there are literally hundreds of mainstream media articles trying to debunk allegations of human trafficking and the Podestas should at least make you raise an eyebrow. Probably a pretty safe bet to assume that Myanmar's ushering into the DC swamp by none other than Hillary Clinton and Obama was some kind of pay-for-play scheme, and this likely had a lot to do with the rigged elections there, especially since we now know that the military performed their coup d'etat due to election fraud and presented evidence to prove it. Of course, the lamestream media never mentions this evidence, which you should probably always take to mean that there's a cover-up and a spin campaign happening. This leads us right into the connections with George Soros' Open Society Foundation. Now, keep in mind that Soros' globalist organizations work through NGOs, or non-governmental organizations, and they have been using color revolutions to further the globalist agenda by overthrowing any government that isn't loyal to the New World Order. Even Wikipedia admits that the Orange Revolution played a major role in the Ukrainian elections during the mid-2000s. Now, on March 16, 2021, it was revealed in an article that the military arrested employees of Soros' Open Society Foundation and seized the bank accounts of the NGOs there. 11 staff members were arrested, including the head deputy, on suspicion of financially supporting the civil disobedience movement against the military junta. The fact that fake news media refers to the military as junta, a pejorative, should tell you a lot. This kind of framing usually is designed to make uneducated people believe the people so framed are radicals and extremists. In another article from March 17th, the mainstream media and the DC swamp openly admits that civil disobedience might restore democracy. That article, which is probably produced by the fake news media, offers us insight into how the liberation efforts of the military are going. Now let me pause here to say that we don't know for sure if the Myanmar military that overthrew the government earlier this year is a true rule of law effort and a force for good. But given the fact the media has tried to paint them as criminals and claim that the elections were fair when they weren't, and they didn't even bother rebutting the evidence brought forth by the military, likely means that they're probably the good guys. Look what happened with Trump. I can't say much about that, but those of you who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. You know you're dealing with a liar and a cheat because when you bring up evidence of fraud, they don't properly refute it with an evidence-based counter-argument. That's key. Instead, they avoid the evidence, claim that there is no fraud without good explanation, and perform character assassination and use smear tactics to discredit those involved. Does that sound familiar? These are the same tactics the media employed against Donald Trump when he made his allegations of election fraud during the 2020 election in the United States. I also want to point out that you can actually use the deep state media to gain a lot of insight into what's going on by decoding the fake news using a bit of critical thinking. As I like to say, disinformation is key information to a well-trained mind. The article I mentioned earlier about civil disobedience being a good thing, that it's somehow going to restore democracy, goes on to say, medical professionals are striking and 2/3 of the country's hospitals are not properly functioning during a pandemic. Now, should we take this to mean that the military stopped the theater of the COVID pandemic in the country alongside its attacks against election fraud? The article goes on to say, the junta may attempt to redesign the electoral system from the first past the post to proportional representation, framing this as an opportunity for ethnic and other political parties to gain more seats in a new election. They go on to say a sham election could then take place with the NLD removed from the electoral map. Now, if you're not aware, the NLD is the party that was ousted by the military in the coup earlier this year. And I suspect what they mean by sham election here is a fair election. It's a classic spin and reframing tactic. The deep state media uses misdirection and projection to confuse people. Recall that the military provided evidence of fraud, which, like here in the US, the media refused to investigate and prejudicially concluded that there was no fraud. When we say prejudicially, we mean they didn't even look at the evidence, they didn't look at the argument, they just assumed that there was nothing to the claims. So given that, it stands to reason that the deep state government and media in Myanmar and elsewhere, like here in the US, likes to label fair elections as sham elections in an effort to destroy the confidence in the military's new, possibly more free government. If the same happened here in the US, the media would label the re-election a sham. We're essentially decoding that fake news media piece to reveal what's happening, like we said earlier. This article also reveals that Myanmar's tech-savvy youth are proving to be a creative, mobilizing force the old guard has not faced before. Now, we know from previous color revolutions, all the way back to the Marxist revolutions in the 20th century, that the youth are almost always weaponized against the government that's about to be ousted. The same is happening here in the US right now. Now, this is a very old tactic. It was used during the French Revolution and spoken about by members of the Frankish Jacobean cult in their writings going back to the late 18th century. These are the same people who founded the Bavarian Illuminati. And these are the same people who played a role in what we might consider to be wokeism and progressive leftism 200 years earlier, who also helped make Marxism what it is. Before we continue, let's talk about protecting your health with EMF Harmonize. This is one of our partners at Stillness in the Storm. Scientific American reported on a peer-reviewed study conducted by researchers at the National Toxicology Program, a federal interagency group under the National Institutes of Health, that cell phone radiation had a carcinogenic effect on living tissue in rats. And some experts believe this study shows a definitive link between cancer and wireless technology. Big tech has worked for years to keep the truth hidden. But as you can see here in an iPhone manual, they admit in their own testing that RF exposure, as they like to call it, is absorbed by the body. They suggest you can use hands-free options to keep your portable radiation device, as I like to call them, away from your body. This is pretty scary, huh? EMF Harmonize uses breakthrough Tesla science to reduce this exposure and transform this energy into something healthy. Go to stillnessinthestorm.com/EMF Harmonize to protect your health today. There's a link in the description. Now, returning to the recent move by the military to oust Soros' Open Society Foundation members and seizing bank accounts, the military claimed the foundation failed to obtain approval from the Central Bank of Myanmar's CBM's Foreign Exchange Management Department for a deposit of $5 million with the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Bank SMED in Myanmar in 2018. It should be noted that those banks are how the nation links up with the International Monetary Fund, which is one of the many ways the globalist agenda is progressed under the guise of improving nations in the third world. Now, bear in mind that money laundering is used in many ways to cover up illicit activities, such as human trafficking, drug running, political bribery, also known as pay for play, and a lot more. These funds can be funneled through NGOs like the Open Society Foundation, used to pay off politicians. The fact that these funds weren't approved by the bank suggests something shady has been happening there. The article goes on to say the foundation is also accused of illegally withdrawing $1.4 million from its account at SMED Bank, that's the one tied to the IMF, a week after the military took over in Myanmar, as the civil disobedience movement was gaining momentum among civil servants across the country. And the article says later, the military said it had begun taking control of all illegal flows of money to Open Society Foundation Myanmar, saying the foundation had breached the laws that laid down the rules and regulations for organizations in the country. Now, these further actions by the military reveals they are declaring open war against NGOs that have historically been used as front groups to control a nation. The article goes on to say, on March 12th, the CBM Bank notified all international non-governmental organizations, INGOs, and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that they would be required to report all financial transactions involving international organizations or individuals from abroad with relevant bank account information going back to April 2016. So they're performing a serious audit here, and this is probably going to expose a lot of connections to some of the players that we know and love over here. The article continues, the order indicates that the military regime intends to investigate the financial transactions of organizations since the National League for Democracy, the NLD, took office in early 2016. Now keep in mind that the NLD leader, the person who was actually ousted earlier this year, is seen in these photos with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. This development suggests the new military regime likely intends on exposing fraud that could implicate the Clintons and other globalists. The article continues, military-aligned groups, including the Union Solidarity and Development Party, have accused Soros Foundation of manipulating Myanmar's politics by supporting civil society organizations in the country. In 2017, lawmaker Yu So-thang, who served as president's office minister under Yu Thang-sin's administration, objected to a ministerial appointment by the NLD government on grounds that the appointed ministers had failed to disclose his previous work for the George Soros Foundation. He said that making the official a national security advisor could hurt Myanmar's relations with China. Lastly, the military might have found the charity used as a money laundering front. The article said, following the coup, the military regime launched an investigation into the finances of Da King Kai Foundation, a charity founded by Da Aung San Suu Kyi. The move is believed to be a pretext to file more charges against the country's de facto leader. Now, it's important to realize that charities are historically used to launder money. Recall how the Red Cross, with the help of the Clintons and Obama, raised billions in relief funds for the devastated Caribbean nation of Haiti. But after review, it was revealed that only 6 houses were built. Man, these guys are really stupid. I mean, if you're going to do money laundering, at least make some effort to look like you're spending the money on good things, right? Well, you know you're dealing with a deep state money laundering operation when only a fraction of the funds raised go towards the declared effort. In closing, I would suggest that the situation in Myanmar is a fantastic opportunity to learn about a lot of things. One, the reaction and framing of the media and their refusal to plainly state what's happening there suggests that whatever is happening there is likely damaging to the deep state and the usual cast of characters. Two, that the fact the military claims election fraud took place and the media and other nations refuse to investigate suggests that there's probably some truth to the military's claims. Three, this is a big one. We can carefully analyze the political process and efforts there as a case study to understand what a similar scenario here in the US would look like if it took place. And four, which might be the most important, the fact the military apparently performed a lawful military counter-coup to undermine the deep state's grip on the nation means that the idea itself is extremely dangerous to the globalists in general. Now, keep in mind, the way the globalists maintain their control is through manipulating the thinking and beliefs of the people within these deep state controlled nations, like ours in the US. Now, an idea is a very powerful weapon if it's in the right hands and it's used properly. That's why they spend so much time censoring people. It's because ideas might be the most dangerous thing out there. And the fact that ideas are so dangerous should also convince you and all these black pillars and hopelessness pushers out there that when we share information online, it is extremely powerful by sharing ideas and getting the information out there and raising awareness and forming alliances than we ever would by running around with guns and trying to supposedly round up the deep state in a futile effort. So don't let the black pillars deceive you. The mere fact that you're taking interest in this information, you're actually trying to share it and gain a comprehension of it and using fact checking and critical thinking and discernment, that is extremely important. The same idea of a positive counter-coup was alive and well during the revolution of the colonists against the British in 1776, which might have been one of the greatest assets during that time of freedom and patriotism. So this idea about a positive military counter-coup could spread like wildfire across the world and likely already has. I suspect a lot of this is part of the so-called plan from our military insider. I also suspect that the alliance wanted this to happen. They wanted Biden to steal the election, so to speak. I mean, they didn't really want it, but you get what I mean. It was part of the plan. They wanted the truth to be revealed. And they wanted Myanmar to play a role in introducing the idea of a lawful military counter-coup into the minds of oppressed people everywhere. Recall that Mike Pompeo, the former director of the CIA, who was appointed by Trump and is likely a loyal patriot, had a lot to say about Myanmar. Reuters reported in October 2020 that Pompeo voiced concern about Myanmar's parliamentary elections. He also said on Fox News, just after the coup took place in February of this year, that the Myanmar government, headed by the NLD, was heavily influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. Take a listen.
Secretary Pompeo, explain for our viewers why the coup in Myanmar matters and how it's connected to potential Biden weakness on China.
Well, Laura, I think you've seen a number of actions where the Chinese Communist Party is already testing this administration in ways that they dared not when President Trump was leading America. You've seen it on Taiwan. You saw it again in the last couple days, now in Myanmar, in what used to be Burma, where the Chinese Communist Party has made real advances, and now they're flexing their muscles and their power. They are now intent on building a deep water port and a pipeline inside of that country in a way that will really give them power over those people, larger power over the region, and much to the detriment of the United States of America. I hope that the administration will take real action in response to the coup the military conducted today or yesterday morning inside of that country.
How much should we be worried about Taiwan, given what's happening in the South China Sea right now as we speak? Our ally Taiwan in jeopardy. Yes?
So Lord, Xi Jinping is serious about this. We sold them weapon systems that had never been sold to help them defend themselves. We honored the commitments that we made. We demanded that the Chinese Communist Party do the same. It's something that's very concerning. I hope they'll continue to do the freedom of navigation operations, all the things that demonstrate America's commitment to the people of Taiwan need to continue to happen. I hope that's the case. There has been a long-standing bipartisan support for that. I hope the administration is prepared to continue down that path.
Notice that he didn't say anything about the military coup being unlawful or undermining democracy, like we hear the fake news media saying all the time. This could suggest that he believes it's a good thing, and that when he says, quote, the government should take action, he could be talking about the loyalist patriotic military here in the US, which could aid the anti-deep state military that is waging war on Soros and the globalists in Myanmar. We're going to be continuing to follow this story, and let me know what you think in the comments, and please send me any information you have about what's going on in Myanmar. If you enjoyed this content, please like and share this video. We're getting shadow banned on a regular basis, and we need your help to share the news and information they don't want you to see. I also thank you for your support and any contributions you can send our way to help produce more content like this. Until next time, keep critically thinking.